Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Terry. Some really insightful points there. And talking to the topic of change and transformation, in the coming years, we are faced with a significant transformation of the world behind a clean, low carbon setting. Business has to be front and center of this transition. Just 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. So, the opportunity is there and to drive real change if we can realign business behind a clean setting. And thankfully, talking to that, I have two great panelists, Tom Rivett-Carnac, who will be chairing this discussion, and Cara Hurst of Amazon, who will be leading the points and talking to the point of the race to zero. So some of you might have seen that kind of come to, my Twitter feed was awash with this discussion, I think, towards the end of last week. So I believe Tom and Cara will be talking to that and much more in this session now. So without further ado, Tom and Cara, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I am delighted to have this chance to have this dialogue with my friend and colleague Cara Hurst at Amazon, our partners in the Climate Pledge. And so I'll just say a couple of things to set the stage and then kick off with some questions, and we'll take it from there. So as was mentioned, my name is Tom Rivett-Carnac. I'm a founding partner at Global Optimism. I've done a variety of different things related to climate change in my career. I worked at the UN, I worked at CDP, and a range of other things. And what we're going to do now is we have 15 minutes of discussion with me and Cara, and then a 15-minute Q&A. So please do start thinking of your questions already at this point and start submitting them, and then we can deal with them in the second half of this quite short session. So just to sort of set us up, I mean, even before we got to this point with the pandemic, we knew that this was going to be the most consequential decade potentially that humanity has ever faced. We have left climate change so late, even with all the efforts made throughout the Paris Agreement and since, that we now know that we need to reduce emissions fully by 50% in the next 10 years if we're to avoid triggering some of these really alarming feedback loops that mean we can lose control of the climatic system. So that is really a once in humanity chance, a once in humanity last chance to get that right. Now, in the context of that, that means around a 7.9% emissions reduction every year, which is unprecedented in the history of humanity. And piled on top of that, we now, of course, have all the underlying structural issues associated with inequality, and now, of course, a global pandemic to deal with. But we can't wait. We can't wait to deal with those other things before we can focus on the climate crisis. So, Cara, it's so good to get a chance to talk to you today. And what I want to just kick off with is you have really spearheaded this work inside Amazon since you joined some years ago to focus the company on dealing with this issue. And together we announced, Jeff Bezos, Christiana Figueres announced the Climate Pledge to get to net zero by 2040 in September last year, with Amazon being the first signing member. Can you talk us through how you pivoted and worked with your colleagues in Amazon to focus on this issue? Because it was really quite remarkable when it came out that you were embracing this very ambitious commitment.
Thank you. And thanks for having us today and the opportunity to share a little bit more about what we're doing with the Climate Pledge and participate in the conference, which seems to have so many good sessions looking over the content. So just to follow up on the question, Tom, I think that one of the things that we've been doing at Amazon is first and foremost looking at our own operations, looking at what we needed to do to understand the impacts that we were having throughout the many businesses and different ways that Amazon operates. So we have logistics and transportation operations, we have a retail business, we have products, we have services, a cloud computing business, a studios business. It's a very diversified set of impacts and businesses. And so our team in sustainability really worked with our operators, worked throughout the company to fully understand what that looked like, what those impacts showed up as in terms of carbon, but also just other environmental issues, social issues, and really began to build a foundation of how we think about sustainability at Amazon. And as we were doing that, and obviously closely watching the conversation, even externally looking at the science that was emanating out of the good reporting that IPCC was doing, looking at the effects of climate change on our planet, we were recognizing the challenges with our delivery operations with increased carbon emissions. And we knew that we had an opportunity to not only take care of that internally, using our scale, putting out those market signals, but really driving kind of, using our size for good and driving the scientific methodologies, the carbon footprinting processes, the carbon system of record that we developed, and thinking about how we push that forward. I know from my many years in sustainability that you also never want to go it alone. There are so many good efforts out there, so many good things already underway, so much to learn from in other coalitions and collaborations. I was a big fan of your work and Christiana's work, thinking about all of what it took to architect the Paris Agreement. And I knew that ideally, if we could bring global optimism into this, we could really think about a way to accelerate not only our work, but externally what we were doing, using your experience and knowledge. And also, you know, having some accountability to this, because of course, when you announce an ambitious goal, as we did with the climate pledge to reach net zero carbon by 2040, there are a lot of questions that come with that. How will we do that? What is the articulation of that inside Amazon? What are the expectations for other companies? So I think that the climate pledge became something, you know, watching the conversations between you and Christiana and Jeff and me and my team and thinking about how do you scope that, was a hugely opportune moment to take that position and then invite others in to say, it's not only just Amazon that, you know, needs to do this and think about our operations and send market signals and, you know, really drive that. But we really would love any company that is thinking about this and is wanting to take that first step, or maybe it's their 10th step into this to make that kind of commitment. So when we launched it, we did talk about how we would do that. We launched what's called the Right Now Climate Fund with a $100 million investment in natural climate solutions in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. We said we were going to purchase, and we made an order for 100,000 electric vehicles with a company called Rivian. These kinds of things are meant to accelerate that transition. They are meant to signal that we think this is an opportune moment to make those systemic changes. And we're really, really excited about working with other companies as well to do that.
Great.
Yeah, and you know, I guess I have a question for you as well. When you founded Global Optimism, you know, after leaving the UN, you know, you had so much opportunity to work across sectors. And now working with us, working with the private sector writ large, all of the things that you launched after securing the Paris Agreement, thinking about how should the private sector approach this moment. I'd be interested in your thoughts about, you know, as your introduction, I think very well articulated, the moment that we're in is so incredible. And how should sustainability professionals, how should we see our roles in kind of this very challenging time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and thank you for all that background on what Amazon's doing. I'd like to dig into some more of those things in a minute, and so we'll go to some questions from the audience in about 5 minutes. So do provide your questions if you'd like to, and I can moderate them for Cara. But just to your point, I mean, I would go back to, and this speaks to why we were so excited to do the climate pledge together with you and with Amazon. Christiana and I really, there's lots of turning points that can be pinpointed on the road to the Paris Agreement, but one in particular came in 2013 at Davos, when there was a group of CEOs that got together. I remember sort of late one night in one of these kind of World Economic Forum evenings, and decided, actually it was 2014, so it was a year before Paris, and we were aware of these risks that ambition was going to be watered down. There are these, you know, there's always these like forces of darkness, we'd kind of call them, that are trying to sort of push the ambition level and make it less and less ambitious. And a group of business leaders got together and said, we will not accept this, and we are going to commit to being net zero by 2050, which at the time was the most ambitious type of commitment that we'd seen. So as a result of that, what we saw was the whole imagination of what was possible began to move further and faster than where it was before. That ambitious commitment galvanized people and encouraged them and inspired them that they could go further and faster because there were these credible leaders standing up and saying, this is possible. That line in the sand really had an outsized impact on how everybody else thought about what they were doing, thought about what was possible on the road to Paris, and began to really change the narrative. And this kind of road to net zero, as it was even then, I would argue had an outsized impact on the private sector, on cities and other subnational governments, and ultimately on the national governments themselves when they came to make a determination as to whether they were actually able to deliver the Paris Agreement. So the reason I'm sort of telling that story is what we've been really inspired by what Amazon have done and what we've co-created with you is this commitment to 2040 to being net zero by 2040 without full understanding of precisely what is going to be needed to get there at every step, but a commitment to go in that direction, to invest against that, to take all the necessary steps, and to issue a call to everybody else to come along and demonstrate that level of additional commitment. That's never going to be for every company in the world, because that's a high level of ambition, but there are leaders who are capable of meeting that challenge. And my sense is, and Christiana's sense is, that as that momentum builds and as more and more companies get on board with that, that will change not only those companies and their operations, but the impact of that, the demonstration of it, to inspire more and more companies to go further and faster, is incalculable in terms of where that would lead. So I would encourage sustainability professionals to look at this moment as an opportunity to step into a real moment of leadership. That's what we need right now, as we're coming out of these multiple crises and we're trying to pivot to focus on the things that we know we need to. It's a real opportunity for leadership, and what it requires is people to step up and say, this is the moment I'm going to go further and faster and invest against it, even though there are so many other challenges coming at us at the one time. Now, I have lost Cara on my screen. I don't know if anyone from Ethical Corporation can help her, if you're still there, Cara.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you. You turned your video off.
Okay.
Yeah.
The video is on. Okay.
I can see you, but you're now not the correct way up. You're coming from the side.
Okay. Sorry for technical challenges.
There you go. Okay, you've returned the correct way up.
There we go.
So,
okay.
So we're going to go to some questions in a minute, but I just wanted to ask you very quickly before we do that.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of give us a bit of an update in terms of your progress, particularly a bit on nature-based solutions? You've made some big investments against that, and then we'll go to some questions from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And to follow up on what you just said, I think when we looked at the climate pledge and what we wanted to do, talking about decarbonizing first and foremost, but we think that nature-based solutions are one of the many ways that we would work towards net zero carbon. We also were looking and reading and speaking with many people and thinking, you know, there has been criticism of offsets, but we think that, you know, we need to work through that, just like we need to work through many things that are unknown on this path to zero. And we want, through the climate pledge, we want companies to commit to absolute permanent reductions, to, you know, look at the majority of their emissions, but for those emissions that are not technically feasible, or where it's not going to be possible to get to zero, we think that natural climate solutions are a part of that. We also think that they are a part, as Christiana and many of the you know, I think it was over 60 NGOs and academics and other organizations that you all convened and wrote some, you know, principles around natural climate solutions. We think that it's not an either or. We think that it is a both and we strongly believe in that. It echoes how we think about these natural climate solutions, by first cutting emissions, but then we need to conserve and protect ecosystems. We need to be socially responsible as we are doing that. We knew also at Amazon we did not have all the expertise in that, so we've relied on our partners at the Nature Conservancy. We've partnered with other coalitions and thinking about, you know, what can we learn to play our role in protecting wetlands, peatlands, forests around the world. We've made 2 investments from the fund so far, but we're learning as we go, and it's really about really accelerating the opportunity to be able to invest in these natural climate solutions, not currently to do something for Amazon, but again, because we think they are part of the overall solution to climate change.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, great. That was very helpful. Thank you for that. So I am going to go to some audience questions by using this Slido app that I haven't used before, so hopefully this will work. So many of these are for you, Cara. They're about Amazon and how you're implementing this, but we'll fund them between this. So first question is, how is Amazon ensuring the funds are there for this climate action? Is there an internal carbon price?
We have not set an internal price on carbon. We are right now in our kind of first year of implementing the climate pledge. We're following on many years that we've been working on, you know, understanding our impacts, providing internal information to our operators about their individual carbon footprints associated with their business, developing our net zero carbon strategies internally. We're setting goals, interim goals along to that. A good example of that is our renewable energy goal, where when we launched the pledge, we set a goal to be 100% by 2030 and 80% by 2024. We've taken a look at that, and we think we can go faster. So we've recently revised that goal to be 100% by 2025. So we are looking at goal setting as a mechanism. We're looking at internal operational business changes, and along with that, we're making investments. We do have, with the Right Now Climate Fund, obviously, an ability to make external investments in those natural climate solutions. Internally, we're talking about all the ways in which operators just need to make this part of how we are working now at Amazon. That's not to say in the future there may not be other things that we consider, but that's where we are right now as a company.
Cool. So there's a question about how you engage, because obviously one of the interesting things about Amazon is the platform, and I mean there's obviously so much, but the number of people that you engage with through the platform. And I know that you have the Smile function so that people can use their purchases to also make donations to different not-for-profits. But there's a question about whether or not you are currently or thinking in the future about how you'd use the platform to engage with consumers to encourage them to make more climate-friendly choices.
Yeah, well, at Amazon, we are a customer-obsessed company. That comes first and foremost, and it's one of our leadership principles that everybody knows internally, and we work backwards from the customer as we think about how we run our business, which I think is a real, just incredible way to operate. We always put the customer first. We have ways of doing that internally and thinking about it and writing about the customer and what they need. So of course, I think everybody was very motivated and excited about the climate pledge, but also about all of the sustainability work that we're doing. We have a circular economy team, and we have launched a customer-facing website called Amazon Second Chance to talk to customers about renewing, reusing, refurbishing, recycling, repairing their products, and not just things that they buy on Amazon, but really any product that is in their home. Also what to do with the packaging material that they receive. We've been reinventing packaging on behalf of our customers and taking out a lot of waste. In fact, about 27% of waste we've taken out of our packaging, as of 2019. So we're constantly thinking about the customer in many, many different ways. We know that our customers want to be a part of this, and absolutely the teams that are working on products and services and on our retail site are thinking about how to involve the customer more comprehensively and how to work backwards from them and think about what would be great products and services that we can deliver to the customer.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, this is just a slight aside, but I was talking to somebody who's very well versed in the climate change sustainability world the other day, and they didn't know the extent of the commitments that Amazon has made, right? Because that wasn't cutting through in all of the other news, the scale of the commitments that you guys have made. And there's multiple reasons for that. But I think one of them is that, of course, Amazon is a company that many people have a kind of day-to-day relationship with, of things like packaging, that, packaging arrives and you see that, and that may not be the largest source of the footprint, but it feels significant because you're always recycling the boxes.
Sure.
Maybe it is. How much of your footprint is the packaging? Because it feels significant on an emotional level to many of us.
Yeah, we don't break that number out,
Okay.
but it is a much smaller number than people would anticipate that it is. And so it's a very important thing, though. To your point, people, it's a tangible way that people interact with the company, and it's, I think, also a way that we should and can lead, because we do have an influence in packaging as well, just like we do in transportation and logistics, which is a much bigger part of our footprint.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. So this is an interesting question. In terms of, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit in terms of the engagement internally, and you've said to me that the climate pledge has led to quite a bit of excitement, that people internally have been pleased to see Amazon taking steps in this direction. How is sort of climate change related performance measured internally and rewarded? Is there an executive pay correlation with it? Is there another mechanism that you use? How is that done?
Well, I think climate or reduction of carbon and thinking about innovation and what new products and services are being developed are all part of how we are measured. We have goals that we take internally, and these goals that we have around the pledge and around both what we're doing, to deliver on the pledge internally at Amazon, but also what we're doing to bring the pledge to other companies. All of these goals are reviewed at an executive level, including our CEO, as you well know, who has a very strong interest in this work. And I think that we haven't tied pay to this. For us, that's not, there's a lot in terms of how the Amazon compensation system works, where I'm not sure that would be the right way to go. But we definitely have goals that people are held accountable to, measured on. We have a lot of, I think if everyone's aware, we have a lot of data and a lot of metrics that we utilize at Amazon internally. And, at every monthly business review, every quarterly business review, we have not only my central team looking at what are the performance around our path to net zero. So we have a quarterly business review that tracks all of the metrics that roll up to that. But then each business has, developed monthly business reviews to track those metrics and to track performance against those metrics. So we are very deep in the ways that we're looking at how this is rolling out, even within our first, year or so of looking at this 2040 goal, because it'll be a year in September, but the teams have gotten very, very quickly used to incorporating sustainability or carbon reduction or whatever it is in their team that has an impact into their business planning, their business operations. And it's right, those metrics are right alongside other things that we're looking at. We have had for a longer time, metrics that are incorporated into things like our fulfillment center kind of dashboards and how people are looking at building performance and how we're measuring the energy and output of buildings, what they're doing to manage energy efficiency. We've had those for a very long time, similar to goals on packaging and goals on other areas of renewable energy. Now we're just looking at it in a bigger umbrella of net zero carbon.
Got it. And there's an interesting question about the relationship. So the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance is this very interesting collaboration of asset owners around the world who have made a commitment to taking their entire portfolios to net zero, typically by 2050. And it's been really interesting because it's demonstrated how those financial market value, how the linchpins work, that when that's put in the RFPs to the asset managers, then they have to deliver products that will be net zero in that time frame. Have you, as a company, have you found that the investors have been supportive of your transformation? Have they been mentioning it on earnings calls? Have you been pushed? Have they been resistant? What's the experience of that been like?
Well, I think that, there was definitely, Amazon had some, we had some work to do to increase our amount of disclosure we were doing in this area. We have done that. There's been a huge amount of support for that. We had disclosed information, but we hadn't done it in one comprehensive, kind of more holistic way, which we did when we launched the pledge. So there's been a great response to that. When we launched our carbon footprint, we followed GHG protocol and had it externally assured, and we're, reporting against it. So I think there's a lot of things like that that have helped people to understand the company. Again, we are a very complex set of businesses, and so it does take some time to understand what that looks like and what kinds of questions you might want to ask about all of our different businesses. But I've definitely seen I think a strong positive reaction to that and to the ambition that the pledge represents. In early days, of course, there's questions about how are we doing it and what is that going to mean and the accountability towards it, which are to be expected. And we talk a lot at Amazon about how we welcome that inspection. We have a culture of that internally, right? We what's called dive deep. We think a lot about the data and information, and we are open to inspection. We should be. So I think there's been a good positive response, and there's a number of issues that we know we still need to do more on, and we want to talk more about externally and begin to tell the story and share more about how we're doing, because we think that's also something that, as we develop these carbon systems of record, as an example, we operationalized our carbon footprint. So we built software internally that allows us to look at carbon in a very specific way, down to the shipment level. So we're able to not just put out a carbon footprint that is, in an Excel spreadsheet, but we've developed software systems where people could really use that information and also think about, when you're making a decision for the business, what is the carbon impact of that before you make that decision? So we're able to model those kinds of things for people, which I think change how we think about our business.
That's super interesting. So have you had experiences of like looking at different strategies and then working through the numbers, and then that becomes part of the calculation of experience around which way you go, sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So I realize we're getting close to time. There's one more question which I'm going to pose to you, and then we're getting close to having to wrap up, where somebody wants to know about whether there is a contradiction between Amazon's business model of faster delivery and selling of products and the sustainability goals, or how you bring those two things together.
I love this question, because one of the things that we learned when we were working on this carbon system of record was that there are things externally that people assume about speed and sustainability that we, maybe even people on my team, had assumed, but we found to be not true. So one of the interesting things is our same day delivery. When we were able, again, to go that deep in our carbon footprint and really look at the implications of different delivery modalities and different ways of fulfillment, we found that our same day delivery, so that's our 1 hour, 2 hour delivery, our fastest delivery, is actually the most sustainable, which is kind of counterintuitive to what you read externally. And we found that, you know, we've done a lot of research, as we recently talked about, that, you know, we can see e-commerce is more sustainable than, in most cases, than going to a store, going to a physical store. And we know that because we have physical stores and we can look at that. So we are looking at all of these different things. And again, going back to decision-making and how we look at things, we want to be able to go to that level of granularity with our data and in our information and really understand, and then start to challenge some of these things which people believe that speed is bad. When we put product closer to the customer, so when we have more fulfillment centers in urban areas and we have more density of customer and more concentration, that allows for a much more sustainable experience in terms of getting things to people fast. So we know in all the different transportation modalities we know what the carbon footprint is of those different ways of operating and modalities. And again, we're constantly trying to reinvent our business on behalf of the customer. We know our customers want a more sustainable experience. We're going to continue to do that. But speed and sustainability can be friends. So it's a really interesting way to think about it.
And counterintuitive. I see that. Yes. We are getting close to time. Just very finally to say, you know, we have been partnering on this for a year, and it has been great to see the dedication and the commitment that Amazon has brought to this. And I've really been encouraged to see how broad this has felt internally at Amazon. So I want to congratulate you for that, because I know you've worked for many years on that. And also to just say that commitment to net zero by 2040 is open to other companies. So there are others who've already joined that will be announced at some point in the future. But as you said, we would really invite other leading companies to step forward and participate in the climate pledge. So part of today is to let you know about that and invite you to join. Do you want to say any closing words, Cara, before we relinquish the floor?
No, thank you for that. And thanks to everybody listening for those great questions. We are really interested in sharing our experience, what we've built, and we are hoping to continue to strengthen our Climate Pledge community. I know that we will. We have, you know, we're growing every day, and we're really passionate about the planet at Amazon. We're really passionate about these topics. We are interested in using sustainability, you know, to kind of use our scale for good. So if there anybody wants to reach out, talk to me individually, or I'll put you in touch with, you know, the right expert on my team. We really want to share what we know, and, you know, hope that more companies can commit to reaching net zero by 2040, and bring some of these coalitions together, because I think that is a really exciting moment. Even with everything that's going on in the world and everything that we're challenged to kind of incorporate in that, we're really, really excited about this, and we're staying on that path. So thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit more about that today.
Great.
Thank you, guys, and thank you. And what a way! Thank you for ending on that note. Open invitation to, you know, get involved in the action, and, you know, the more we can, more we can have other companies and organisations join in this, the quicker we can, you know, deliver the change that we need to see. So, Tom and Cara, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and thank you to you guys for all continuing to submit your questions. We are I've been trying to get through them throughout today, and we'll do so for the remaining sessions. And my colleagues have asked me to remind you that do get involved in our survey. It's underneath the live stream you can see at the moment, or visit slido.com hashtag RBS Virtual. Okay, so moving on. Joining me will be Filippo Velio, the Managing Director, People, Programme and Outreach at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Filippo will be sharing his thoughts on how COVID-19 is going to impact the future of capitalism, the decade ahead, and the SDGs. So not much then. Okay, over to you, Filippo.